What's going on, guys? Joshua back at it again. And today, this is kind of the first of many videos to come, right? As a part of a series of just me kind of talking about me designing my game, Your World, which is my Final Fantasy, Jesus. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy lately. My fantasy tabletop game, my epic fantasy tabletop game, which was live on Kickstarter. It's all done now. It was successful. So I'm now in production of this game, designing it. It's going great. And this whole series is just going to be kind of dedicated to me telling you guys about what I'm working on, what parts of the game am I thinking about. And then you guys have some insight in between the playtests, right? So you're not just waiting like every 2 months or so for like a new full playtest package to see what's changed or whatever, but rather like you get some insights into what I'm thinking about, what I'm working on, and that sort of stuff. I foresee myself doing one of these about weekly. It's gonna be easy because it's mostly just whatever I've been working on. I just kind of have an open dialogue about it. I guess not truly open because it's just me talking out loud, but it is here for you guys to also comment about different things that I'm thinking about down below, so I can read those thoughts as well, so I can get some insight as to what maybe you guys like, what you don't like, all that sort of stuff. But with that, guys, today's topic is magic items. Yes, magic items. They have not had any sort of appearance in the tabletop game prior to, really so far they haven't had any appearance at all. But in the next playtest, they will. But yeah, I've been working on the magic items along with other things, but I feel like this is a good place to start just because, I don't know, because there's no foundation for it yet in any of the playtests. I feel like it's the most new thing for players to kind of see and kind of hear about. So that's why I'm kind of choosing this. But yeah, I guess like again, there's no real format for this. This is more an easy way for me to keep you guys in the know, kind of keep you updated on the progress. So you don't feel like, oh, that guy just kind of disappeared, right? No, I'm still here. I'm still working on it and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so with that, magic items. Maybe I'll have like the words pop up there. Magic items. All right. So magic items in your world, right? What I've been thinking about is how I want these to take shape, right? There's a lot of magic items in all kinds of video games, board games, and all that do a very different things just depending on, or even items in general, depending on the game, if they aren't magical. But they can add all sorts of things to your characters, right? And I've been thinking about like, what role do I want magic items to play, right? In my game, most of the power you get comes from your class and your subclass, right? Primarily your class, because within your class, you're largely choosing your arts, right? A lot of your core abilities, and then your subclass will give you more of that, right? A lot of your versatility of abilities also comes from feats, right? So when I look at magic items as an additional thing, right? My game is very customizable right now. There's so many options, so many combinations. Players naturally get stronger, right? One thing I thought about was that I don't think I want my magic items to strictly be just power boost, numerically at least. In games like D&D, you have +1 weapons, +2 weapons, +3 weapons, things like that, right? Very effective. Nobody can argue they're not effective. You won't be mad that you get it, right? It will make your character objectively better at whatever they do. If you're increasing the spell save DC or the attack roll bonus or the damage bonus, all that is completely good, right? But I think one thing is that it's boring, and it just kind of starts just kind of strictly mechanically, no flavor, no sort of cool abilities, but just strictly like mechanically, numerically pushing your character kind of forward, which that's not a bad thing. But my game already assumes that the players mechanically are going to be very strong. It's made to make you very strong and epic, not like completely immortal. There still needs to be challenges, but power is not something that the players are lacking, right? So when I thought about how I want to approach making magic items instead of just going straight into it, just because again it's so easy to do the numerical stuff, let me try to focus on doing things that will add to the characters' identities more. Things that'll be more quirky but still useful, right? Things that will feel like they add a new sort of maybe tool in your kit, something that your character maybe wouldn't normally be able to do, but add something new. Maybe doubles down on some of your class's abilities or things like that, right? But something that will at the very least feel like it's a little bit more, maybe more of a diagonal to horizontal boost as opposed to a strictly like vertical one, right? So in that way, right, I have items like I'm still working on this one, but Ring of Manifestation, which is basically like you can I say ring, it could really probably be anything, but it's just make a decision and live with it sort of thing. But essentially you can create objects that with this ring, right? Like these sort of force sort of objects. They're not weapons, but you can make like I don't know, like a ladder or a bridge or things like that. And as of right now, it just dependent on like maybe a stat, like your charisma, you may be able to make bigger and better things, right? That's actually one of the most complex ones, not the most complex item that I kind of thought of because I haven't written all the rules out for it. Because when I started thinking about, it, I'm like, this is so cool, but it's gonna be pretty complex, right? Yeah, I got one called Unbreakable Bond, which essentially there's two bracelets and two different allies can wear these bracelets, right? And essentially, as a reaction, you can take half the damage that your ally wearing the other bracelet would take, right? I like it because this is sort of interesting thing that is not useful all the time, but if you do have that sort of squishier character and you're that much tankier warrior class, and they get hit by a critical hit or something, you can take half of that damage, and maybe you have another ability that diminishes that damage type. Maybe you're resistant to that damage type, right? So it's one of those things that's it's quirky. It's not used for everything, but combat happens all the time. There will be situations where this will be very useful. Again, especially for a class that maybe specializes in mitigating damage types, right? Or even maybe like you're having like a druid in my game who does a lot of elemental damage and gets elemental resistances, and maybe like a warrior or somebody that can get like some physical resistances or something like that. And then you both kind of, when you get hit by a fire blast, the druid takes some of that damage, knowing that they can reduce that damage. And then maybe when like the druid gets hit by a physical attack, you take some of it, knowing that you can resist it, right? I like stuff like this that kind of makes you like think it's a totally new way to even interact with other characters and things like that. These are the sorts of things I want to go for, right? I got other examples of things. Some of it is like basic, like something that makes you like faster and things like that, right? They're sort of the staples, right? But I definitely want things that feel very flavorful, right? So there's that. And of course, we have sort of like more typical things you'll see in a lot of RPGs and stuff. Items, rings, necklaces, things like that. That will give you a resistance to a damage type, or immunity, things like that of varying rarities. I came up with a ring of proficiency. It just grants a skill in one proficiency. I'm going to add verbiage like this is kind of predetermined by the DM, right? Stuff like that. But ultimately, they're these those things that you just kind of have to have. They're kind of easy to think of, very easy to make. Again, it's not exactly the same as like a +1 weapon or anything, but it is one of those like those staples of items that nobody's gonna be mad when they get this sort of item, right? It will be useful, it will be helpful. Right. So a lot of my mostly everything I've talked about so far is like the accessories, more like items like necklaces and rings and shoes, gloves, things like that that you'll put on. And will buff you up in some sort of way or give you something that you don't have already. And then there's also consumable items, right? Again, I know I talked about having like unique items that are very quirky and stuff, but we also need the staples, as I've said a couple times already. So you need different degrees of healing potions, right? You need the potions that can heal conditions and things like that. You need the potion that makes you fly or invisible, all that sort of stuff, right? And not just potions, but other consumables as well, magical tomes or scrolls and things like that, right? So right now I have a lot of the staples, a lot of the basic stuff. In the next playtest for sure, you guys will see a lot of the, I'll say the more generic items. Those will be very easy to implement. Again, those take a lot less thought, and then if they need to be tweaked in one way or another, again, those more generic ones that are in every RPG, whether it's video games or like tabletop games, those are a lot easier to do. So a lot of the potions currently kind of fall into that category of healing conditions, or maybe granting you invisibility or resistance to an elemental damage type. Another thing I wanted to do was, instead of having like a potion of fire resistance, a potion of lightning resistance, a potion of, water resistance, all that. That's why make like 15 potions that do the same thing. Just make the one potion, the potion of resistance, then say what it does. It gives you resistance to one damage type, and then it's determined by the DM. That way you don't have to worry about like, there being, like multiple listings of the same thing. It's just, it will tell you like, oh, maybe there's like elemental damage types or like psychic or whatever else, right? So yeah, there's that. That's another part of my whole process for this is to make my job easier. Is there a way to make this all more efficient, right? While still making it clean, making it easy to understand, not cutting corners, not making it where you guys are missing anything, but making sure that you have everything you need without adding excess pages just cause, or excess entries, or just all the different damage resistance types in the form of potions. That's too much, right? But so there's that. That being said, there is a little bit of redundancy, but I think in some of the potions, but I think it's also kind of important for some of them to. There's a little bit of redundancy, but also a lot of need for some of the uniqueness of some of the potions, right? But yeah. So with that, I got a couple other things like a potion of adrenaline that will give you advantage on power and agility based rolls. I like that. I don't know what rarity I'll make that, but that's the thing. Again, if something I like thinking of like the potion first, and the effects, and then thinking about like the rarity after, because I feel like there's a place for any potion. And yeah, if it is really powerful, you can always increase the rarity, right? And that's also the fun thing about consumable items is that like you can get a rare item very early on as consumable, but maybe you won't find another one like this in a very long time. So yes, maybe you pop it during that fight and it makes you really strong during that fight and you really needed it, but it's not like it's just like maybe raining potions that give you certain like advantage on certain things and things like that. So that's kind of the nice thing is like some potions, like certain healing potions and things, may come a lot more frequently than other ones that give you a lot more like power buffs, even if for a short time. So consumables, I think, is an area that I really want to explore the most. Actually, I think it'll be one of the most fun things to do since there's an inherent limit of these, right? I love giving my players consumable things. I think it allows more fights to be even more unique when you pop that one potion that will make you super strong or fast or a little bit more resistant. It's nice when the party has fire resistance for the fighting the fire dragon and stuff like that. But yeah. So that's a little bit insight into like the consumable items. For some of the ones that give you like invisibility or something like that, kind of arbitrarily, I decided to just have a lot of them be for 10 minutes for now. Maybe I'll make them longer. Maybe I'll make them shorter, right? I think it's one of those things where when you have a list of them, when I start putting them in play, I feel like 10 minutes is long enough to where, like, if you think of fights coming up, you can, pop it ahead of time with some, prep time, or it can last after the fight or for a longer fight, right? It's like a potion of flight, things like that. But yeah, so it's one of those things where, some of them maybe should only be like a minute. Maybe some of them should be, you know, an hour, right? I think it's so early that I think it's more important to have them. 10 minutes, I think, is long enough for anything to last. Maybe too long for some things. But I think anytime you're starting out, like before you've play tested anything, I think it's nice just to have like a equalized amount of time, right? Especially for like if you have an understanding for how your game is supposed to go time wise, like how long a combat encounter is, in the world. Like in D&D, most combat encounters are less than a minute, right? Thus, like a potion lasts for 10 minutes, you're pretty much Gucci for any battle. But yeah, so a lot of them are like the ones that have a duration, like a immunity potion or resistance potion, things like that. They're all about 10 minutes right now. So there's that. But yeah, with that's largely consumables. There's something I'm going to talk about that's about kind of items as a whole that I haven't really done too much work on or I'm thinking about currently. But next up is weapons and armor. This is where the +1 stuff and the all that sort of stuff typically comes in, right? It's the +1 to hit, +1 to damage, all that. And even though I said that I don't really want to do that, I kind of did. not strictly just like plus 1 to accuracy and all that. I don't think players really need that. I think the bonuses you get in this game are already very naturally good. You know, your freedom of ability score increases and your proficiency bonus helps out a ton. Right. But what I did, similar to how there's potions of resistance, and then it's just like one, that's just one sort of entry, right? And then it's just, pick one type of resistance for this damage type or for the damage type, right? I have the same thing for weapons as far as your elemental weapon, right? Why make it an elemental like a flame tongue sword, right? What if I want the flame tongue hammer, the flame tongue bow and arrow, right? It makes it to where you have to make 50 different entries for every single weapon, or one entry for every single weapon, right? Just to say that these all do the same thing, that 1d6 of fire damage, right? Or you only do give it to like melee weapons as opposed to like, you know, like bow and arrows and things like that, right? Which to me is just kind of, again, it's wasted entries, right? It's way more for a weapon that is effective but not terribly, I'll say, unique. It's very powerful, right? By like increasing your base damage by a pretty significant amount from now to the end of time, basically. But it's more or less generic in the sense that it's just a damage boost, right? Of a specific elemental type. And then you also have the fact that, there's not a lightning tongue sword or a thunder tongue in D&D, right? Or, the ones that do all the different other, elemental types of damage, right? To me, I feel like that's just one of those is kind of a very easily corrected thing. So for me, I have the elemental weapon, which deals an extra 1d6 elemental damage on a hit. And then I'm going to add the verbiage of like, the damage type is predetermined. So it might be lightning, it might be, acid, whatever the case may be, right? And then we have a spiritual weapon, which will either do a necrotic or radiant damage. And then the damage type is predetermined. And then the cosmic one, which is psychic or force damage, right? So it's much more about the universe, space, and time, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so that covers so much, right? Because if you have a party of 4 people, you can give all 4 of them an elemental weapon, and it's all different types, right? Or give one of them a spiritual weapon if it's like a paladin type of character, or they're trying to lean more to the holy aspect, or a cosmic weapon if they're a little bit more into space and the unknown mysteries of the universe and that sort of stuff. So even within these weapons that the description is very simple and straightforward, there's still just as much versatility as I don't know even what I'm comparing it to, but there's still all that versatility, and not the tediousness of, oh, there's the flame longsword, the flame greatsword, the flame, longbow, and then all the other weapons, and then there's the lightning version of all of them, right? You have 500 entries of every single damage type for every single weapon if you do that, right? Or you just wouldn't have them, and then that's a missed opportunity for a lot of players who want a magical weapon. That's thematic. If I choose to make a lightning character, having a lightning weapon that I find feels good. It feels great, right? So what I like about those 3 items, elemental weapon, spiritual weapon, cosmic weapon, is that I fit hundreds, literally hundreds of weapons and magical items into just 3 items, right? I love that. That's what I want to do in this game. I want to make it simple, easy to use. You know, you don't need hundreds of item entries if you have these item entries that contain multiple items within them, right? So I could see theoretically there being in total in like my final version of my game. Ideally, I'd like to have like 100 item entries in total, right? As far as like official entries. Within them, there might be thousands potentially. Now, a lot of that thousands is, like I said, like the longsword that has like the magical fire longsword, the magical lightning longsword, the one that does all the damage types, right? And then copy and paste that to the greatsword, and then copy and paste that to the longbow, copy and paste that to the gauntlets, right? So that's what I mean by like hundreds, right? Um, Different combinations and all that, right? It's all kind of contained in that. But I can see as far as separate actual official item entries in total between the weapons and armor, consumable items, accessories, I can see there being like 100 in total, right? By the time the game eventually comes out. In this first playtest, there may be like, actually, I can see there maybe being like a solid 40, right? Again, not including all the alternate versions of the elemental damage weapon, type, weapon types, damage type combinations. Um, different, the consumable items. I like my list of consumable items so far. Consumable items are very generic, but they're the generic that you need to have. So nobody's gonna be mad at that, I think. But yeah. So I think where most of the work will have to be done overall is gonna be the accessories, um, and even more than that, the weapons and the armor, right? Um, because I have the generic weapons, right? Those are about as close as I'm willing to get to the +1 weapon, right? The +1 weapon, the +2 weapon, the +3 weapon, right? Is these elemental, spiritual, and cosmic weapons. The generic damage type that when you hit, it does a little bit extra damage of that damage type, right? Um, Beyond that, I want to focus more on unique items and weapons, and this is where this becomes not tedious in a bad way, but just tedious in the sense that like I want to make unique weapons for basically anyone can pick up, right? And D&D had a bad case of we have all these magical swords, and then from there it went downhill. Like less magical hammers, less magical daggers, less magical bows, a lot less magical bows, right? It's like there's a weird filter you're going down. You have the swords at the top, and then less of all the other things, right? And so my current goal is and I have to reference my weapon table for this a lot. My current goal is to have 2 magic weapons for each weapon type, or like for each weapon in the game, right? Long sword, dagger, like longbow, short bow, all of them, right? And now some of them might be less um like I might not do it exactly for like the longbow and the short bow, right? Mostly that's a damage difference between those 2 weapons and maybe like a range difference or something like that. So fundamentally I could maybe have I don't know, let's say why can I not think of any sort of like mythological like archers? Let's say Aloy from Zero Dawn, right? Let's just say like, there's like Aloy's bow, right? I can see that being like, yeah, you can make it a longbow or a short bow, right? I don't need to make 2 unique longbows and 2 unique short bows necessarily. Most people that can use the short bow can also use the longbow, typically, right? If not everyone who can use those can typically, do both. But again, a great sword and a long sword are 2 different things, right? So the long sword, or the great sword might be something more akin to like, I don't know, an Excalibur sort of thing, right? Whereas the long sword, I don't know, might be something more akin to like a keyblade or something. I don't know. But all that to say, um, I think for the most part, 2 magic items for each, I'll say, unique weapon, right? So again, if there's like a short sword and a long sword, I feel like those are both close enough to where whatever unique item you have for like the long sword, it could come in this short sword package or form as well. The only thing that would mostly change would be the damage type, or not the damage type, the like the damage die. So maybe instead of a D8, it's a D6 or something, right? Um, but yeah. So more or less 2 unique items for each weapon across the board, so that to me, I think that covers a lot of bases. If you want your place to have some unique or to have some magic items earlier on, the elemental weapons, the spiritual weapons, the cosmic weapons will be great for that early on, to give them something on theme for their character, or just a new way to do a different kind of damage type and all that sort of stuff. And then eventually they get a super unique item, a super unique sort of exotic weapon, if you will, of their chosen like weapon type or something. So maybe they have like a very like sort of special katana, that some great warrior wielded, and maybe it has some cool, I don't know, feature, like I don't know, it's like the blade can like extend and it can hit more people or something. I don't know. Maybe I should write that idea down because I just thought of that. But the point is that like I want the exotic items to also be something I can put a little bit more thought into, since it will be like these are a little bit more exotic. And since they aren't strictly damage buffs, it's not like I have to like worry about, oh, you only get this at like level 8. you could potentially get it sooner, and it could be a very defining feature for your class or for your character, a defining item for your class. I keep saying class, character. Um, but yeah. So I'm the weapons and the armor. I didn't really talk about armor, but armor, I can see there being like armor that gives you resistances, much like different, bangles and necklaces and that sort of stuff. But yeah, armor is probably the thing I've thought the least about. I'm just not that worried about it right now. But there will be armor, magic armor as well. It just feels like it has to be a part of this. As I'm recording this video is like 20 something minutes long. It's probably gonna be significantly lower as I cut out a lot of repeated stuff. But I'll say the last thing about all these magic items, or last two things I'm thinking about, is the requirements for them and the rarities, right? And I'll say eventually the cost, right? But money is something in this game that I haven't thought about a ton about yet. I think that's something that as I get a little bit further along in solidifying things like rarities and things like that, I'm going to think more about like, what is like, what is the currency in this world? Like how much, do adventurers typically get, on adventures? What's like the max, gold maybe anyone should get in their like whole adventuring, like, I don't know, like a whole adventuring lifetime or something, trying to think about it from different angles so I can like hone in like, yeah, like maybe this is about how much gold they get during like this like level or like that one, or this is how much like items will, like of this rarity will generally cost, things like that, right? But so I guess those are the three things I most got to think about in terms of generic, not generic, but in terms of general stuff. The requirements for certain items, like accessories and weapons, right? And the nice thing for like weapons and armor is that there's already going to be some degree of requirements already, right? You have to be proficient with certain weapons and things like that. So it could just be like having proficiency in said weapon could be a huge thing that's already in place, right? To help with that, or you have to be proficient in the armor, stuff like that. Things of that nature may work extremely well already, since that already kind of limits like, you don't got to worry about like your wizard, although the wizard isn't unlocked yet. But eventually, when the wizard is in the game, you might not necessarily have to worry about the wizard picking up the Excalibur blade and using it extremely well, because you have to be proficient with that type of weapon, right? So I think that will actually already do most of the legwork for things like weapon and armor. But maybe for certain accessories, you might have to have a certain amount of points in a certain stat to use them and all that sort of stuff. Rarity is one of those things that I'm going to have to feel it out, right? And rarity is more of a soft rule than anything else. It's I would advise you not to give your players this sort of thing until maybe later in the journey. I'm planning to do 5 levels of rarities, broken up into like the 5 tiers of play, or like every 2 levels of the 10 levels of your character. So it'll be pretty easy to know like, all right, around this level, I can give my players these items, right? A lot of playtesting will have to go into that to know exactly like, should the players get this around level 3 and 4, or like 5 and 6? You know what I mean? Because every 2 levels will be pretty significant for players and the tier they're in and everything like that. So getting a really powerful weapon 2 levels earlier could be significant. But yeah. So guys, that's pretty much magic items. This video is rounding out to about 30 minutes, it seems, at least recording wise. Hopefully it's closer to 20. A lot of this was rambling. I plan to talk extra and cut out more. But yeah, guys, this is kind of what I want to do weekly. It might not be a new topic every week, and maybe next week I talk a little bit more about magic items, maybe new ones I thought of, maybe other features or ways to do requirements and things like that if I have a breakthrough. But yeah, I want to do this just to keep you guys in the know. For people who don't know about the game, let them learn about it. I should let you all know the Kickstarter page is still up. So if you want to read about the game, if you want to watch the trailer for it, if you want to see the playtest and things like that, there's links to stuff on the page. It's still a live page. You can still get information about the game there. You can also get information about the game on all my pages, on all my social media. I got videos about it all over the place. So you can check it out there as well. And if you want to support the active development of this game, you can support my Patreon, which is going to just help me to just dedicate even more time to this, and to just hopefully advertise it more, make, get more marketing materials, things like that. Really trying to, solidify this game, trying to, push it, get more people to know about it, guys. Because I think there's a lot of good stuff here. I think a lot of people will love to play this game when it's a finished thing. But yeah, guys, with that, that's it. Thanks for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And cannot wait to see you all again next time in your world. Peace.